Before you continue, breathe. Not in haste, not out of habit. Breathe as if it were your very first breath. Because what is about to surface in your awareness isn't new. It was just hidden. If these words echo within you, leave a comment. I choose to see what once blinded me. Like the video, subscribe, and share it with those who also feel something is out of place. Because all of this, it begins before the first yes, before the first no. It begins in silence. Cultural programming, the invisible conditioning, is the system that teaches obedience before it teaches thought. And the most unsettling part? It does so with a smile. The mind is born wild, open, untouched, but soon receives its first frame. Be nice, don't cry, repeat what you hear. Small words, yet each carries the weight of a cell with no name. Obedience becomes beautiful. Questioning becomes dangerous. The touch that should liberate conditions. The hug that should comfort teaches fear of rejection. This is where invisible training begins, through love. It's not punishment that traps us first. It's the fear of losing affection. And within that conditional love, freedom begins to bleed. Then the child learns the game. Smile at the right moment. Stay silent at the wrong one. Slowly, the wild becomes tamed. Not through force, but reward. The cage is invisible because it looks like protection. Obedience wears the mask of virtue. And when someone asks if we're truly free, we no longer know the answer. This is where cultural programming begins, when the being stops being and starts becoming what's expected. But that frame is only the entrance to the maze. The real conditioning field begins when the bell rings, and all march in line toward the place where thinking will be taught, but only within carefully drawn boundaries. School, a symbol of knowledge, a monument of progress, is also the first major sanctuary of mental conditioning. The promise is freedom through education. But often, what's delivered is repetition disguised as wisdom. Cultural programming sharpens here. Straight lines, fixed schedules, voices you must not question. The child who once spoke to stars and listened to silence now learns that thinking outside the box is wrong. The mind bows before it even realizes it's bending. Raise your hand before speaking. Wait for the bell to eat. Repeat without understanding. These are the new rules, soft but sharp. It's not about teaching how to think, but how to repeat. Authority no longer needs to shout. It's etched into blackboards, grades, and applause for the most obedient. Those who stray are corrected. Those who question are labeled. School shapes more than intellect. It molds the soul. Because whoever controls your thinking model controls the world you're able to see. Over time, learning merges with performance. Knowledge bows to grades. And the student who once sought to understand starts seeking approval. Success becomes synonymous with acceptance. And the most dangerous question, why, gets replaced with ready-made formulas. In this environment, cultural programming becomes routine. The thinking being, once hungry for truth, now fears making mistakes. If this resonates with you, comment, "I was trained not to ask." But the programming doesn't end when the last bell rings. It merely shapeshifts. Now it's the screens that take control. Colorful, seductive, always smiling, and always telling you who to be. When the final class ends, Another one begins, silent, constant, masked as leisure. The media steps in as the invisible teacher. It doesn't demand attention, it hypnotizes it. Cultural programming shifts from chalkboard to screen, and there, unknowingly, the mind opens like fertile soil. Every ad, every show, every filter is a seed, a thought planted without consent. What to wear, what to eat, what to feel, what to fear, all decided for you before you even knew to ask. The power of media isn't in what it says out loud, but in what it repeats with images. It doesn't force, it seduces. Freedom becomes aesthetics. Love becomes performance. Pain, a product. Cultural programming becomes entertainment. And behind every canned laugh, there's an unspoken lesson. Be this, think this, buy this. The mind now confuses stimulation with truth, because what is constant becomes belief. Little by little, the media's voice becomes your own. You start to judge using criteria you never created. You reject parts of yourself you never truly met. You crave things that never belonged to you. All of it without pain, without screams, without resistance. Just subtle, polished, irresistible programming. If you feel something in you was shaped by screens that never turn off, write in the comments, "I silenced the voice that wasn't mine." But even media is not the final layer. There's something deeper, more embedded, a form of invisible reward and punishment that shapes not just what you think, but what you feel permitted to think. And that's where we're heading now. Long before we notice, we're playing a game we didn't design. And in this game, the currency is acceptance. The world offers subtle rewards, applause, likes, approval, and punishes with silence, withdrawal, sideways glances. Cultural programming is a silent trainer. It doesn't need to punish. It simply withholds affection. And that's enough for the mind to adapt, to quiet down, to fit in. The prize is belonging, and the price is who you were before trying to belong. From early on, we learn to smile to please, to give in to avoid conflict, to pretend in order to be loved. And this repeats into adulthood, with clothes that don't reflect us, opinions that aren't ours, smiles that hide screams. The system rewards those who adapt, not those who reveal themselves. Being authentic in this arena is risky. It means stepping outside the magnetic field of acceptance. That's why many choose to live as edited versions of themselves, because it hurts less than rejection. The conditioned mind learns that obedience brings safety, that pleasing others is survival, but the soul, it aches. It starts whispering in dreams, in silences, in empty spaces, because it knows that every yes you said to be accepted was a no to your essence. If this awakens something inside you, write, "I reject the reward that denies me." That's the first act of rebellion, choosing not to be domesticated. But perhaps the most disturbing part isn't the reward or the punishment. It's that almost no one questions it. The collective silence in the face of the absurd. The normalization of the unacceptable. And that is exactly what we must confront next. In a world where everything screams, notifications, opinions, statistics, what truly frightens is silence. The silence in front of the obvious. The absence of questions. Why does no one question the rules? Why do we keep following patterns that suffocate us? Because from a young age, we were trained not just to obey, but to fear judgment. Cultural programming has built a magnetic field where thinking differently is dangerous, and those who dare to question feel the weight of being the exception. Most people don't stay silent because they agree. They stay silent because they learned that thinking too much has consequences. The rebel is ridiculed, isolated, diagnosed. The system doesn't need to extinguish your flame. It just points at you and says, "You're wrong." And just like that, the silence of the rebels echoes louder than 1,000 screams. And that echo haunts. Because everyone feels something is off, but no one wants to be the first to say it out loud. The collective mind protects itself through the comfort of conformity. It's easier to repeat the mantra than to risk the doubt. But sometimes the question erupts from within. It doesn't ask for permission, it burns. And when it comes, there is no turning back. If you've ever felt that, comment, "Doubt set me free," because doubt is the first whisper of freedom. It's the collapse of illusion. It's the crack where truth begins to shine through. And if there are cracks, there is light. And through them, we start to see something even more unsettling: the false idea that we are free to choose. But what if the choice is just another part of the script? The idea of free will is sold as a triumph, a modern trophy. You are free to choose. But to choose between what? Pre-designed products? Pre-scripted careers? Paths paved by invisible hands? Cultural programming doesn't imprison you with chains. It gives you options. But all of them exist within the same maze. The script is long, but every page was written without you. And still, we applaud every decision as if it were truly ours. You wake up and choose what to wear, what to eat, what to post. But how many of those choices were born from within? And how many were installed without you noticing? Conditioned behavior is most effective when it feels like freedom, like a stage where every actor believes they're improvising. But there's a director behind the curtain, and its name is cultural programming. The illusion of choice is the most sophisticated leash because it doesn't hurt. It doesn't tighten. It even makes you smile. When someone breaks the script, the system malfunctions. It calls them insane, extreme, dangerous. Because the one who steps off script exposes the fact that the script exists. And for those who still believe they're the authors of their lives, that truth is unbearable. But what if you could rewrite it? What if the next page hasn't been printed yet? If that made you pause, comment, "I choose to leave the script." Because choice holds power, but only when it rises from silence, not repetition. And it's in that silence that unlearning begins. Seeing the script is not enough. You have to dissolve its words. And that process takes courage, because awakening is not an arrival, it's a dismantling. And that dismantling begins now. Awakening is often romanticized, as if it were a moment of light, ecstasy, a sublime revelation. But the truth is that it begins with destruction. Awakening is unlearning. It's looking within and realizing that almost everything you believe to be true was installed. And when that realization hits, something dies. The ego screams, identity dissolves, the ground disappears. Because what we called self was a reflection, a construction, a mosaic of voices that were never yours. Unlearning is risky. It means letting go of applause, certainty, routine. It's saying no to what everyone else says yes to. And that's terrifying, but it's also freeing. In that emptiness, something real begins to rise. Not a concept, a presence. You no longer know what to think, what to want, what to follow. And that's a good sign, because now, maybe for the first time, you're finding yourself without middlemen, without conditioning. At this stage, silence becomes a teacher, solitude an ally, discomfort a doorway, and everything that once made sense begins to collapse. Because the mind seeks answers, but the soul seeks space. Space to become what it always was before the programming. If this step has already begun within you, right? I'm unlearning to remember who I am. Because remembering is not about accumulating, it's about emptying. And in that emptying, you begin to see the true structure of the maze, not as something external, but internal. The code that governs thoughts, emotions, reactions. And once you start seeing it, the prison has already started to dissolve. The code isn't just in the world. It pulses inside the mind, like invisible lines, automatic instructions, emotional algorithms. You react before thinking. You feel guilt before understanding. You repeat before realizing you're repeating. That's the power of cultural programming, turning external commands into internal reflexes. The mind stops being a compass and becomes a mirror, reflecting fear, expectation, the approval of others. But when you begin to see this clearly, the code trembles. Seeing is the first act of freedom. Not seeing with the eyes, but with presence. Seeing the thought as it rises. Seeing the reaction forming. Seeing the impulse without following it. This takes practice, courage, silence. Because seeing requires stopping. And stopping is the last thing the system wants. It needs motion, noise, urgency. Because in the noise, the code hides. But in silence, it reveals itself. When you see the code, there's no going back. Words that once felt natural now sound programmed. Automatic emotions lose their grip. Hurry loses its meaning. And no matter how loud the world becomes, it no longer commands you. Because those who see no longer obey blindly. Those who see choose. If you've started to see, comment, "The code does not define me." Because naming the invisible is the first conscious act of power. But seeing the code is only the beginning. True freedom isn't just recognizing the prison, it's breaking the pattern. And that moment is the start of reconstruction. Breaking the pattern isn't a visible act. It doesn't require a megaphone or theatrical rebellion. It happens inside, almost invisible to those still asleep. But within, it's an earthquake. It's when, faced with an automatic impulse, you choose a different response. When you decide not to react with the same fear, not to repeat the same escape, not to accept the same old role. It might seem small, but it's the beginning of a revolution. Because every prison begins with a habit, and every liberation with a choice. The system expects you to react, to feel rage, to strike back, to repeat the cycle. But when you go silent, observe, and act in a new way, the game breaks. The script loses power because it has no place for authenticity. It doesn't know what to do with someone who's awake. That's why breaking the pattern is the highest act of resistance. Not against the world, but against what in you was shaped to obey. At this point, life begins to shift, but not on the outside, yet. It changes in the texture of your thoughts, in the quality of your presence, in the depth of your gaze. And those who look back at you notice, because something has changed. You're there, but you're no longer playing the same game. If this shift has begun within you, comment, "I break the pattern," not out of anger, but out of awareness, not in rebellion, but in clarity. And that clarity prepares the ground for the next step, because breaking the pattern is only the beginning of freedom. True freedom isn't taught, it isn't learned, it's remembered, and that memory is closer than you think. True freedom was never something to be achieved, because it was never absent, only forgotten. Cultural programming didn't lock you up. It made you forget who you were before the mold. That's why awakening isn't a victory, it's a return. A silent return to what was always there. Pure awareness, free, unconditioned. There are no techniques, no formulas, only remembrance. A remembering that you were once free and still are, beneath the thoughts, beneath the roles, beneath the name. At this point, you no longer seek approval, nor victory, nor status. You seek truth, and truth here is not an idea. It's a frequency, a presence, something you feel the moment you stop running, when you stop obeying out of fear, when you simply are. If you've come this far, comment, "I remember freedom," because that memory is the point of return. Like this video if it stirred something long dormant within you. Share it with someone who still believes being free means following different rules. And subscribe to the channel, because in the next episode, we'll explore what happens when the silent mind meets the awakened being. The journey continues.